Word of mouth has been the biggest driver, and I just take every opportunity to talk about tech meetups. Whenever at the start of the event, I always go and chat to people and ask if it's the first time they've been, and if they say yes, I always ask, how did you find out about the event? You know, the talks are really great, but the most important thing is the networking and the people actually meeting and all the value that gets driven out of that. So that's the thing I really focus on.
When do you guys do it? Like, what is the weekday, the time, and why did you choose that?
What we find with the talks is we try and keep them relatively short, so 25 to 30 minutes.
How do you select topics, Keith? It's like, how do you cater for the interest of the community?
We were struggling, we were small, and we're struggling to get anybody to talk.
Let me guess, the next month topics have AI as well?
No.
Welcome back to Mastering Tech Growth, where we interview industry leaders to bring you actionable insights and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Mike, and today we're talking about the intersection between community building and tech innovation and how nurturing a tech community can catapult your personal and your business growth. We talked within the show at least a couple of times about the importance of network effect, right? So joining us today is Keith Harrison. Keith is a seasoned software development leader with a keen eye on building and managing a high-performing team. Keith has about 24 years of commercial experience in software development with a strong focus on the teams, as I mentioned, and as well is a huge advocate about the best software development principles such as clean code, solid, tech-driven development. So before we dive into the episode, a quick reminder to our listeners, if you enjoy the show, if you find the value in the show, please subscribe, leave us a comment. In a form of review, we would like to have a conversation with you. Thank you for inspiring us to make a better content for you. Keith, it's good to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
And thanks very much for having me.
Of course. Keith, so before we go into the topic about the community building, when I say mastering tech growth, what is the first thing which comes to mind?
First thing that comes to mind with mastering tech growth, I think the most important thing is learning. Like that's always been when I was at university, they taught us that the most important thing was that they were teaching us how to learn. And so if you want to grow in your career, get better at your job, become a better leader, the most important thing is to constantly be learning and through as many ways as possible, including getting involved in your community.
Okay. So when you say learning, Keith, is that going to conferences, going to tech communities, watching webinars, reading books? Like, what's your go-to when it comes to learning?
All of those. All of those. So I think the best way to learn is to approach it from multiple directions. Whatever works best for you, but read a book, watch a video, do an online course, go to conferences, watch conferences online, whatever works for you. I think everybody learns in a slightly different way. Maybe go build something. Some people find that sort of practical way of building is the best way, but approach it from lots of different directions. Because if you just read a book, there'll be gaps. There'll be bits you pick up, bits you miss. If you just build something, then you'll only learn about the things that happen to come up with whatever you are building. Whereas if you come at it multiple ways, then you'll pick up all the pieces and then you'll get that depth of knowledge and always practice as well. Practice.
I love that gap element. I find that myself. If I read a book, once I finish, there's bits which will you remember, but there's going to be a lot which just sort of, just fall off of your head. And having this maybe bias action, at least for me, and actually, reading a book and doing things, it's, it combines that knowledge, that concept with an actual practical application, which then solidifies that skill, whatever you're actually learning. So am I right to say, Keith, that your way of learning is maybe having conversations with people, maybe bringing and doing a speech on a stage, and this is how the tech meetup in Glasgow was born, or was that a different story?
No, it's actually a completely different story about how it was. It came into how I got involved and where it all came from. So, yeah.
Give us the story, Keith.
Yeah. So the story is that, so if we go back long enough ago, but I think it's over 15 years ago, there were no tech events in Glasgow, and Tech Meetup was the first one that started. And it was aimed at a very broad audience, And the format was you come along, you do some networking, you get free pizza and drinks, and then there's 2 talks, and then everybody goes to the pub afterwards. And what happened over the years is it brought in a lot of people, but then it started to sort of spin off other events where at the end somebody would say, oh, I'm running the JavaScript event, and people would start going to that. And what would typically happen over time is, because Tech Meetup is quite a broad event, people would look at the talks that were on and maybe say, well, I'm not specifically interested in that particular topic. Really enjoyed going last month, but I am doing JavaScript and I really want to learn more about this, and know there's this JavaScript community. And then, so over time, what happened is we went from one big event to like lots of little events, but much more focused. And actually, Tech Meetup it stopped running after a while because the audience dried up as more people went to all these other events. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit, every meetup in Glasgow finished, essentially. 1 or 2 went online only and did some really good. Some people really put in a lot of effort over that period, really just to give something to people. But ultimately, online, especially for like networking and interactive events, they just don't work. And so as the restrictions started to get lifted, I started going to 1 or 2 events, and there was nobody at them. I went along to one event, and there was 3 people at the event. So I over the years and all the events I've been to, I've learned so much, and it's made me so much better at my job. And it's not just that you learn, it's also that the people you meet and the support network that you have. And the idea that I was going to get all of that in my career, but then, it's just, pull up the bridge behind you, the ladder behind you, sorry. And nobody else gets that, I didn't feel that was right. So I spoke to Joe Wright, who was one of the people that originally started Tech Meetup. And I said to him, listen, all the events are gone. We should restart Tech Meetup. And he came back to me and said, I was having exactly the same idea. So we got a venue. One of the universities gave us a room. We just posted on LinkedIn and to see who would turn up. And we got 40 people. We'd no idea, because nobody was running anything. So we'd no idea who was going to turn up. And there was about 30, 40 people turned up. I thought, well, that's pretty good. So the 2 of us ran it for 6 months. Joe he'd run it for years, and he'd had definitely, like, he put a lot of time into it, and he didn't want to continue to do it anymore, and he just wanted to help restart it. So he left, and then I got some other volunteers got involved, and then it's just grown it over time. So now we get still the same format. We do the networking at the start, we do the 2 talks. We've grown it to about 80, 90 people now that turn up. We run every month. And one of the things that we do is at the end of the event, anybody that wants to start, that has a meetup, they can come and advertise it. So it's not about like you get your audience and then you're trying to hang on to everybody. And it's about creating a community. So allowing other people with whatever meetups that they want to start up to come along, and they can steal my audience. So the idea is that we try and bring in as many people as we can, and not just developers. So I'm a developer myself, but I always say the event's developer leaning. It's not developer like a developer focused event. And we try and keep the talks that are broad enough so pretty much anybody could come along that has an interest in tech and get something out of it. So we have people that are we have a kid who's at school, and he wants to have a career in tech, and so he comes along every month. We have people that work in marketing but are working for technology companies and just want to learn more, and a whole range of people that are thinking about moving into technology, right all the way to people like me that have got 20 plus years experience, a whole range of people. And then we bring in that broad audience, and then the other events that can come up that are more specialized can then come along and advertise their event. And then the idea is that we can grow out the whole community. So that's really what we're trying to do.
I love that, Keith. And this is the same thing what we're doing with Mastering Tech Growth. Effectively, it is a podcast, but behind it, there's a community, and And we talk about very broad topics as well, because there's such a huge range when you think about owning a tech venture and what it means to actually scaling this. It will go from the development level to infrastructural level to marketing and sales and just and just putting goals. So there's so many topics to unpack, and of course we could niche down into one of the, let's say, most important areas, but we remain talking quite broadly with a lot of people around different topics. And the idea is the same, is that we want people to come in and listen in, and if they want to niche down, there's more shows which talks about separately about AI and a product and marketing. So help us to build the community of mastering tech growth. So let's take this as a use case. We currently have, let's say, a Slack channel, has a couple of hundred people, but we don't have events. We don't have a venue. So how would one, from a business perspective, if they want to build, let's say, a small community of people interested in whatever, maybe a service or product they're doing, or whatever is the value they're providing, to have ability to have this very close distance to potential clients or potential fans, and and be able to have these conversations, like, what is the first step you would do?
So I think the first step when you're doing a meetup is that they really fall into two broad categories. So one is a community-based event, which is what Tech Meetup is. So where it's where people from the community are volunteering their time, and they really care about creating a great community event for everybody. And then there's business-focused events, and there's absolutely room for both. But you have to decide which one of those two you are. If you are trying to do a business-focused event that is, the primary reason is for trying to market your product, or to try and get more sales or build more clients, or whatever that is, but you try and pretend that it's a community event, then it doesn't work. And those types of events, so you really have to decide which one of those two do I want. And then, so once you know that, then you can start building out your community. And everyone says that they're not on it and they don't like it, but you can't beat LinkedIn. It has just been great for reaching out to people and getting the podcast, the meetup known, and getting more people to come along. So I think that's a great place to start. And the second thing is word of mouth. Like word of mouth has been the biggest driver, and I just take every opportunity to talk about Tech Meetup and say why it's a good thing, and convince people that to come along. And it's amazing that people that you speak to, and sometimes you speak to people and you think, that seems like a waste of time. I don't really think that I achieve very much. And then they're well connected and they go out and tell loads of other people, and all of a sudden so you just never know from the people that you speak to. But talk to everybody, never miss an opportunity I never miss an opportunity to talk about Tech Meetup. And I was renting a car the other day, and I was chatting to the salesperson, and he was talking about how that he was getting into tech and actually doing a course and becoming a developer. And I started talking to him about Tech Meetup. I was with my son, I could see him put he went, as soon as, because he knew I was just about to start talking about that. So, never miss an opportunity.
Okay, I love that. Let's try to unpack. Let's go back to the community-based and business-based. So how would one recognize another? So how I think this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, is that the business-based is, it's almost a conference, right? So you go to that event, there's going to be people on a stage, giving you a real value, but around you, there's going to be, maybe people like you, but at the end of the day, what you're getting from a stage, it's value packed with an actual product behind it. Maybe it's a service, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's a coach, maybe some type of SaaS platform, solving some problem. So you're still networking, but there's a real notion of commercialization, right?
Yes.
And where community based is, it's really people just like you, maybe developers, maybe marketeers, maybe product owners or whatever, and effectively they're preparing a speech which is coming from their domain, and the whole purpose of that is like, here's what I learned, I want to share with others. And the community goes like, this is great knowledge, maybe ask questions, and then there's network, but there's really no push of services or offerings. It's just a pure knowledge sharing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly the way I'd see it. Yeah.
Okay. So effectively then for our listeners, if they're thinking to build communities or, thinking to do this or another. So one would be meetups, pure value. Other would be more like of a conference, a lot more commercial. Okay. So LinkedIn, you mentioned LinkedIn, and I would do the same. I mean, LinkedIn is so huge. Hashtags, groups. I mean, maybe Facebook groups as well. And the word of mouth was interesting to me. The example you just said, where you just go ahead and you pretty much talk with everybody about this. Do you have any anecdotal successes, or maybe even like a data-driven successes, where people come to the tech meetup, and then they so enjoy it that they go back and they bring more people next time?
Yeah, so certainly anecdotally. So whenever at the start of the event, I always go and chat to people and ask if it's the first time they've been, and if they say yes, I always ask, well, how did you find out about the event? And I think the sort of consistent thing is that they typically hear about it from multiple places. That's a really common thing. They'll say, "Oh, I saw it posted on LinkedIn, and then I was talking to person X, and they said, oh, I should come along." And you do, when people say, "Oh, somebody told me about it," you quite often hear the same names over and over again. There's a certain people that just will do a really great job of driving your event. Typically, there are people that are involved in some way in some community-based or some networking-based role where they're doing a sort of business development role or something along those lines. They tend to be very well-connected people who are speaking to a lot of people, and they will then say, if they think your event is good and they think you're credible and doing a good job, they will promote your event for you. Those are the areas that drive people to your event. The other thing we tried to do, like a little bit of marketing, is we created stickers, like little Tech Meetup laptop stickers. And we said to people, right, if you want to get a sticker, to get a sticker, you kind of need to do what we want people to do. So you can be an organizer, because we want people to volunteer to organize. A sponsors get stickers. If you do a talk, you get a sticker. And if you invite somebody along who's never been before, then you get a sticker. And then so I can then say to people, is to then encourage people to try and, if they come along once, to bring along their friends.
That's quite nice. Just incentive to participate. It's almost like gamification. Like, if you want to be like a level 1, whatever it is, and in our community, you get this sticker and you can just, walk up. So when you were giving this kit, I was thinking, if I'm a business, or I just want to have my community, but maybe I feel like that's going to be a lot of challenges, a lot of time consumption, and I don't want to do this, but I would want to sponsor one, so I get the exposure, I get people seeing my brand. Maybe I don't know, maybe I can come in and do like a guest talk or something like that. Like, is that a thing? Like, how do you actually find sponsors for your tech meetup?
Yeah, so we pay for everything with sponsors. And so we have a number of really great sponsors that sponsor our event. I think so the way I actually was able to do it was quite early on. I got contacted by a recruiter, a guy called Stephen Hill at Mac Recruiter, and he said to me, "Can I come along to the event?" And I said, "Sure, of course you can come." But I said, "You can't do any sales work or pitching unless you sponsor." And he said, "Okay, I'll sponsor then." I was like, "Right, okay." And then I was a bit surprised by this, but I thought, well, that sounds good. And then I said, "Would you want to meet for a coffee?" So we went for a coffee and had a really good conversation with him. And he really understood how to make it work. So I think that the way it doesn't work is if you think that you're going to sponsor the meetup, you're going to come along to the meetup and you're going to get a bunch of leads. And that will not work. And if people try that, they'll just get very frustrated and pull out quite quickly. Mm-hmm. But if you use it to promote your brand, to cut through on LinkedIn, so everybody's posting on LinkedIn, but how do you get people to see your posts? Well, if your posts are associated with a meetup, and as long as they're not too pushy or that you show that you get it and you get the community, then it really can cut through and people can see you can really help build your brand. and give you that visibility that you can't get otherwise. So you have to sort of understand that it's that longer term type of value that you get out of it. So if you get partners that really get that, then it works really well for both sides. And I think as well for the meetup, it works well because the sponsors give us credibility. So when they post about the event as well, not only does it bring help them cut through on platforms like LinkedIn, but it also makes our event look better because look at these sponsors and these big companies and they think we're good. And so it works for both sides when it works really well.
Okay. So you didn't look for sponsors sporadically. You effectively got approached by a recruitment company. What that was like a Genesis sponsor for the tech meetup?
Yeah.
And then others followed?
Yeah. So what's great about recruiters is they're very well connected. And so they brought a lot of connections and links, and then that's what brought the other sponsors really through that. So having a good business connection to your community meetup is really good. Having a good business partner and making that relationship work really well is really key to getting a lot of attendees, because recruiters are connected to a lot of people. So when they post it, it gets to a lot of developers, and also getting to companies and getting sponsorship from them. So it's really good for both of those.
I love that. Let me ask, do you guys have an online presence? Any like Slack, WhatsApp group, Facebook group, LinkedIn group, or is it just a face-to-face?
We've got a LinkedIn group that we use for marketing the events, and we use Meetup as well for ticketing.
Okay.
In that sense, it's fairly limited.
So it's to effectively avoid newsletters, or do you have like how do you announce people like here's a date, here's what we're going to be talking about, here's our talkers? Is that in the LinkedIn group?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no like newsletters situation where you just blast an update or something like that.
We don't, but there are a number of other newsletters that so Scottish-based and Glasgow-based newsletters, and they very often feature us as one of the events. So they help drive traffic as well. But internally, we primarily use the LinkedIn group. What works really well is, I'm no expert in promoting on LinkedIn, but I certainly learned a lot about it. But like we'll post on our LinkedIn group, which LinkedIn essentially treats like a company. And you tend to find those posts do okay, but not great. But if they get reposted, so I will then repost that as myself and say, announcing our first speaker, those posts do much, much better. So I always say to people, like, can you just, on your personal account, can you repost? And then that really helps drive the those speaker announcement posts, which then drive people to come to the event.
Yeah, that's definitely true. There's no one knows the algorithm of LinkedIn, but from sheer testing and experiencing, I can tell as well that the moment you post, if you get interactions such as likes and reshares and comments, it gets shown to a lot more people, because LinkedIn sees that as a people engaging, so it probably means there's value to people. So it starts sort of showing to first and second and third level connections, so you can get that virality happening. Okay, so I think we understand this. Is there a reason why you don't have something like Slack? Like you yourself personally, Keith, do you have some type of like chat like Slack, I don't know, Telegram or something where you part of other communities to just have some brainstorming situations?
So we do. There's two Slack channels. So one is our internal organizer one that we use. There's also, so Tech Meetup isn't just the Glasgow Tech Meetup. It's actually a family of sort of loosely associated events. So they're all over Scotland, and so we have a Slack channel as well. There have been, over the years, there's been various attempts to start Slack channels for all sorts of different groups within the Scottish and Glasgow tech communities. And so inevitably they all seem to just end up becoming ghost towns, and that they don't really seem to engage and stay on focus. So it's not anything that we've tried to do. Definitely tried to focus on growing the physical event and getting people to turn up. I think that's, in some ways with Tech Meetup, the talks are really great, but the most important thing is the networking and the people actually meeting and all the value that gets driven out of that. So that's the thing I really focus on.
Yeah, I get you. Because if you're part of Slack in other communities than your work itself, because you're effectively working from 9 to 6, or if you're remote, maybe you have more flexible hours, but majority of your day is effectively dedicated to whatever is your day job. So being part of other communities and participating is very unlikely.
Yeah.
And when I find the communities which are quite vibrant in tech, they have tens of thousands of people. So the people who actually participate are always like fractional or coaches or self-employed individuals, where they actually have more time on their hands to participate within those communities. But a full-time employed devs or product owners or marketers or whatever, they spend majority of the time within the business, within their day job, and then you have those days, Wednesday or Thursday after work, where they can actually go to the events. So that is, I think, a better positioning, which leads me to a question. When do you guys do it? Like, what is the weekday, the time, and why did you choose that?
So we run 6 p.m. First Thursday of the month. So we try and do it on a specific date so everybody knows where it is. In practice, nobody remembers that first Thursday of the month, but that's when we know that the event is going to run. So we try and run it so that people can come after work around about 6 o'clock. What we find with the talks is we try and keep them relatively short, so 25 to 30 minutes. And it's just because, like you see, people have been at work all day, so they do have, it's not like a conference where you've got like a full day of energy for it. You are tired and drained after a day's work. So I tend to find that if the talks go on more than about 30 minutes, you start to see people in the audience start shuffling and lose a bit of interest. We try and keep it relatively short and enough for everyone's attention span at that time of night, but you're still getting value from it as well.
Okay. That's actually a very good shout. I mean, I've been in couple myself, and yes, after work, you do want to network, but you just want to relax. You just want to have that slice of pizza, maybe have a pint and just have a chat. Listening and actually engaging becomes quite difficult after like 20 minutes or so. How do you select topics, Keith? It's like, how do you cater for the interest of the community? Do you have like surveys, or is it more about who wants to come out and talk and you just take whatever comes?
So initially it was just whoever was. We were struggling. We were small, and you're struggling to get anybody to talk. So it was pretty much whoever got in contact, or people we could get in contact with. We were definitely not lucky enough to have really much in the way of options. But we were very lucky in the speakers that we got. Amazing. We've had so many amazing talks. Now, actually, we're sufficiently big that we get approached. It's almost solely that speakers come to us and ask to be able to speak. And what we've tried to do is we've sort of changed the type of speaker. So initially, when we were quite small, we're very keen with first-time speakers. So we would have maybe one experienced speaker and then one first-time speaker, and give somebody an opportunity to do a first talk. And it's a super friendly audience as well that is very, very appreciative of people doing their first talk and understanding like why that's a good thing. And really, whenever you say at the end, and that was our first talk, you always got like a big round of applause and everybody was super supportive. But since the audience has grown a bit larger to sort of 80, 90 people, that's too big for somebody did it last month, which was absolutely amazing. But for most people, that really is a bit of a large group to do a first talk at. So we've tried to pivot away and go for more senior people. And just to try and also keep the audience interested and engaged with more, trying to get a bit more value in the talks and more people that are would be like more experience or something that might be hard, the sort of type of talk that might be harder to get to see elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
That gives more value, more reason to come to Tech Meetup. So we've tried to do more of that way.
What was the last 2 talks of last month? What was the topics?
So last month we had somebody from, they were working for the Scottish Government. It was an absolutely fascinating talk on, they were doing a report for the Scottish Government about how tech is used by government. And he was talking about how every time, not every time, but very often when governments create legislation, they're creating a software system off the back of that, because they'll come out with a bunch of new rules, and then either an existing software system has to change or a new one has to be built. And there's very little thought that goes on in government about how that might actually work out in practice. And quite often it doesn't work out very well. And we see that, on the news all the time with projects going wrong. And so he was talking about how could you change things in government? How could governments do things differently to make this work a lot better? It's absolutely fascinating stuff about so he talked about, rather than spending 6 months creating legislation and then passing that over sort of waterfall style, and trying to get a change is completely impossible, because it would then mean the Parliament going back and re-debating everything. You actually do it the other way around. So you start building the software, learn from that in a much more agile way, and then still have people input into the legislation. But then once the software system's built, you then write the legislation afterwards. So it's a much more agile way of working, and essentially documenting it after you've built the system. And this has been, I believe it's in New Zealand, they've actually pioneered this idea, and this is like a much, much better way of going about it. So that was what he was talking about. And our other topic was, a repeat topic is very unsurprisingly AI. And we've had a ton of AI related topics. And there's so many different ways of coming at AI. And this one was specifically about using an open source tool, the name of which I forget, but you could use that to train up chatbots. And this was actually a live demo where the speaker showed how to do that.
I love that. I mean, it's not surprising people, especially like tech communities talking about AI. It is in a boom or bubble, or up there in I don't know what's the name, but it is a trending thing, right? So let me guess, the next month topics have AI as well.
No.
I'm
actually going to start. So I do try and curate it a bit more. I'm going to start steering away from AI. I think partly because we've had a lot of talks on it, and we've really started to exhaust every different angle that you can possibly come at it. Using an open source library to build something, using it in practice. We've had companies that have come in and said, this is how we're doing it for real. Some of the ethical questions around it and all the problems that arise there. We've done all those angles. So this month we've so Sonos, the speaker manufacturer, have just opened they've had an office in Glasgow that's relatively new, where some of the work to design their new headphones was done. So we've just signed them up as a sponsor of the event, and they're bringing 2 of their guys along to talk about the design and the build of their new headphones.
Okay, that's a hardware element. Is it software?
It's both. So the first part will be, the first talk's going to be more on the hardware design element, and then it will be how that fed into the software and the app and that side of it. But I think I try to have those types of talks because not everything in software development is software development. It's a whole range of project management and testing and requirements and data science, and there's all these different elements that all feed into it. So requirements and design, and even marketing as well, is how does marketing affect software development? If you build a feature that marketing can't sell, it's not a very useful feature if nobody's ever going to hear about it, even no matter how good it is. So all these things play in. So I like to have talks from different industries, but sort of slanted to how it affects the technology and the software development side of things.
I love that you're connecting this up. I mean, in the show we explore this, from all the different angles. But ultimately, if you don't have a service or a product where someone is willing to buy the tech, it just becomes irrelevant, because at the end of the day, someone needs to buy what you're building. Yeah. And then there's an element of, cost management, developer experience, hiring people, how quickly you can change, how quickly you can add new features. So there's a lot of economy which sits at that lower level of engineering, but ultimately the very first bit is, are you able to sell the product or service? If no one's buying,
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
doesn't matter how clean your code is, it just becomes really relevant. Okay, so I want to take us back to this podcast, and let's say we want to build a community, which is really a thing. I really thinking about it. So I want to do a community-driven events where I think we have very good people coming in and giving us an hour of their time. We unpack really good topics, but of course in an hour you can only unpack that much, and you can in theory make a much broader talk, or a much more concentrated talk on the things which care. So I think it would be like community, we will try to teach you type of community or event, and it would just be Mastering Tech Growth, the same name, right? So how would I find the venue? And I think that's like for many people, which I met as well in the communities, like the biggest challenge is like, where do you get the people to come in? How do you find the venue? How do you get money for the venue? How you negotiate the venue? Maybe it's a mutual exchange. I'll bring people so you can, I don't know, sell the beer or something like that. It's like you mentioned university, which I feel like was probably a very easy pick. And I'm not sure if you're still doing the university, but how did you go the venue?
Yeah, so venue is the biggest. So when it comes to running an event, venue is the number one problem, and it's the reason we don't see enough events. It's the number one stress in organising event. I nearly quit running tech meetup over issues around the venue. The venue, and anybody that's ever spoken to me about running a tech event will know that venue is this massive problem. So we. So initially, I had enough contacts and networks that I was able to ask around, and that's how I got in touch with the Strathclyde University. They were able to give us a space for free, but only temporarily, and that gave us enough time. So we ran initially at Strathclyde Union. I then contacted the computer science department at Strathclyde University, and they were able to give us a room there, which we ran in for a while, and then we grew sufficiently large that we didn't fit in that room anymore. But by that time, we'd managed to get enough sponsors to kind of bootstrap the whole thing, got enough sponsors that had enough money that I could pay for an actual venue. And now we're in a purpose venue that we pay for. And the upside of that venue is that because we're paying for it, we can guarantee the time. They have somebody that's there to look after everything and make sure everything's done. When we were at the university, you were relying on volunteers, and in fact, twice they forgot to leave out I think it was the holidays, so the students were all away, so they didn't leave out the projector. So we ended up doing it on a 21-inch monitor. And those are just some of the things you have to sort of get past to try and grow your event. But once we got to that size and we were able to pay for a venue, then that solves all those problems, and we don't have them anymore. But it makes for anybody that's trying to start up, it makes it quite difficult that you have to sort of battle your way through all these challenges. There are some spaces in Glasgow that you can use for free, but typically you won't be able to get them on any kind of regular basis, because if it's a company that owns that space, they'll obviously have the first option to use that. So if they happen to have a business event that day, you're going to get told, no, I'm sorry, but that's been used. So it makes it very difficult to get a regular space. So I'm constantly speaking to people from Glasgow City Council and people that are in the tech community that are trying to grow it. And that's the thing I always say, if we could get like a reliable venue that people could use for free, at least even for smaller events, that would really make a big difference. So yeah, venue is a massive challenge.
Okay. So from all those challenges you're looking, if you want to go from -1, I have no idea how to do this, to I actually have a community which I'm building for whatever is the outcome you're looking for, the venue will be your biggest challenge. You'll still have like people, topics, speakers, promotions, but the venue will be the biggest one.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, which kind of seems crazy. It would seem that would be an easy thing, and the hard bit would be getting developers to come along and getting good speakers. But not that those aren't difficult. It's just the venue is much harder.
Okay. So I have when you were talking about university back when I was in uni, that's, and back in my home country, which is Lithuania, that's about like 10, well, no, it's like 25 years ago. We had as well, this notion of communities being born, and I organized a PHP community meetup. And I went to university and I was like, can you give us the biggest class, which we're able to sit about like 100 people. So I got that class and, we announced and people came from different cities. So they made the travel, was a proper commitment because it was rare to get these events. And we had, good speakers. Effectively, I just gave the venue, but the organizer had the speakers and everything. So everyone came in and we sort of started the event. And one of the professors just came in the room with his class. And he was like, that's my class. Like, that's my time. It stuck with me because I was like, oh, I gave you this venue, like that's on me now. But he was understanding and sort of just walked away. So we still were able to get that done. But when you were talking about the difficulty about unpredictability of time and not getting the projector, and stuff, and I was like, oh my god, that just came back to my mind. So can you disclose how much you pay, Keith, for that one time? Do you rent for 3 hours that day or 2 hours? Are you allowed to bring alcohol like pizza? Like, are there any other rules people potentially could be aware when they're trying to find a venue? Like, any more insights into that?
Yeah, so one of the good things about when we ran at Strathclyde was because it's a private venue, you can really do whatever you like. So you can bring in alcohol or anything like that. When you run in a public venue, then it's I guess every country is different, but it's much more restricted. So we pay £320 to rent the space for 4 hours, and that includes the projector, the speaker system, somebody to manage the event as well, and we bring our own soft drinks and pizza. If we want to do alcohol, then we have to pay a corkage, which I think worked out, I think it was £1 per drink, which completely blows our budget. That's something we can't afford. The other issue that potentially causes is because of licensing laws, it could mean that nobody under 18 would be allowed to come, which is something you don't want to do. So we've stayed away from alcohol. Although we did used to have it because people like to have a drink, but because of the cost and the potential for people under 18 not to be allowed, we don't have alcohol, but we do go for a drink afterwards.
Okay, that's actually a good strategy, isn't it? You close it and okay, we finished learning now. Let's go. Let's go relax. And you probably have less people as well staying, for longer into the night, but then they can actually enjoy it. I would imagine the prices for London would be a lot more than 320 for 4 hours. If you would get that in London, but I personally don't know the costs. So, do you charge for your community-driven event? Like, do you charge people for like £5 and you offload that venue cost, or is it just pure sponsorship?
Yeah, we rely completely on the sponsorship, and we keep the event free. So we want to keep the resistance as low as possible for people to come. So I always say to people, if you want to, so what we do is we'll put out tickets for like 150, and then typically about half of that will turn up, maybe a bit more, 60%. That's pretty normal. But I always say to people, if you want to come, just book a ticket. If you can't make it, don't worry about it, because I don't want people worrying about that or thinking about that. One thing that's really, really common is when people come, they'll say, I meant to come, I'd booked for the last 3-4 times, but I couldn't make it, and this is the time I've come. So I would never want people to not. I always feel like they do all those bookings and then eventually come. So I want to make it as easy as possible for as many people as possible to come. And so that's why we go with that, with not charging.
So I have a different view on this, and this is not my view. It's a view I got from event organizers. So they basically do it free, but they charge for a ticket because they felt that the appearance or conversion for people paying for a ticket and coming is much higher.
Yeah.
So which means that you pay, let's say, £10. And because you paid £10, they get a number of people attending, let's say 60. So when it comes to buying pizzas and drinks, they have a number which they can trust that will be 60 people. So they buy the pizzas, and then once you come, they actually refund your ticket. But if you don't come, they will keep the £10.
Yeah.
And compared to the ones of not charging at all, and this is like A/B test, which they did, they basically were able to spend less or have less waste when it comes to spending on pizzas and drinks.
Yep.
When they did free, people would go like, okay, it's going to be 70 people. They would buy like 20 pizzas and there would be like 40 showing up. And they would be like, okay, we still have 10 pizzas and no one's going to eat that much, and it's just throwaway pizzas. So they started doing this sort of strategy of like, it's still free. You will get refunded once you show up. But then we have a much better number because people, almost like pledge 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And I've seen another approach. I think it's done by the startup scene events where they have these events where, people come in and pitch their startups on a scene. They just have a pledge. They go like, look, it's a free event, but if you find value in it, just give us £1, give us £2, give us £7 if you want. Like you can still do zero and show up. It's all fine. But if you feel like you want to pledge, here's a availability, which brought some budget and made things easy on them. So potentially an idea.
Yeah, I think it's this whole topic about pricing is really interesting because I think those different strategies depend on what sort of event you want to do. So we are going for a big audience, so we want to be free and low resistance. But I definitely think there's a place for even charging and just straight up having a charge because it creates a certain level of intent in your event, and it says we think this is a really good event. The people that are going to come along are really high quality, and then that's why we're charging. So I think there's definitely all those different strategies are really good. The way we manage this problem of so no shows is like a common problem, but it is relatively consistent. So we will see around about 50-60% of the numbers signed up turning up, so we can buy enough pizzas and drinks to make it work. So I always say to people, if you don't come, as long as you do it in a statistically consistent way every month, then it's all fine.
And you probably, if you start charging, you ought to bring a better content, a better speakers. Potentially, if you get budgets, you can actually, pay the speakers to come in and give much bigger talks. But then you suddenly walk in towards like almost like a conference, right? Because it just becomes a lot more commercial, a lot more commitment, not just like come in for 2 talks at 6 p.m. It becomes like, maybe come lunchtime and you're going to get like 4 talks and it's, you need to take a day off or find your own time and things like that. It's just a different, I want to say strategy, but I feel it's just like it's just a different room. It's a different ball game compared to a free community, led events. Okay. I love that. So give some idea. So I'm just imagining, we're doing community, people coming in. So one thing which I would want to do is just to make sure that we're doing well, right? So I think what I would do after the events, I would do some type of like, maybe leave a simple like printout papers where people would go like, the first talk about this, from 1 to 10, I'm thinking it's 4, I'm thinking it's 7, maybe leave some feedback or maybe send an email, go like, hey, if you give us a couple of minutes and let us know what you like, what you dislike, so we can, improve the events. Is this something you guys doing? Like, how do you gauge like if that, you're going the right direction?
I think so we don't do that. We don't do any kind of surveys. It is a really interesting idea, actually. I might look into it. Generally, the sort of North Star metric, my startup background, that I think about is just attendees. Like, are we seeing like lots of people turning up to the event? How can we get as many people as possible? I mean, I certainly get feedback. That's for sure. People are always telling me, "Oh, you should change this and you should do that." Part of the way I feel about that is that if you think a different type of event or something should be changed, rather than Tech Meetup changing this formula, because it's been going for quite a long time, start up another event because there's plenty of room for everybody. So people will say, "Oh, I enjoyed the chatting bit at the start. I wish there was more of that." Well, then start up an event that's like that, that's more interactive or hands-on or whatever, and then come and promote that event. And then people can vote with their feet and say, listen, this is the sort of thing that we want, rather than, so I'd rather see things happen that way, like an event for everybody, rather than, I think if I start kind of tweaking everything and changing everything all the time, it would, it might, the event would lose its identity.
You would, yeah. If you follow the light, you would probably niche down because the light will not be what you currently have, which is quite a broad approach. And like you said, just if you want to have something smaller on a particular topic, just do your own, and people would have these opinions. You want it or not, there would be a majority which will pull into a much narrow corridor, I would
Yeah,
say.
exactly. And I think it's a slightly different mindset because, like, I think when you come from business or startups, the mindset is like, how do we get more customers? How do we grow bigger? How do we do this? With a community event, it doesn't really matter. If people stop going to your event, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Just have another event. So it's about like what events. I would say it's more about what's good for the community than it's what's good for Tech Meetup. If people started up a ton of new events and then people came to Tech Meetup, promoted those events, and then nobody came to Tech Meetup anymore, that'd be absolutely fine if we had that. I'd be really happy with that, even if my event had nobody at it, because we'd have a vibrant community. So I think it's a slightly different mindset about like it isn't growth at all costs or trying to get a return for investors or anything like that. It's really like, can we create great events for people to come to that are really valuable to people and create a great community?
So if I'm thinking about success stories, like, is there anything to share here, Kit, where you like, we had this person, he was showing up, we got this feedback that, I don't know, he found a job or launched a business or like the influence you're doing, you're right. People vote with their feet because if they come in back and, you see the same faces, you're doing something right. But like in this anecdotal or more tangible ways, like, is there success stories which you could share?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And we had somebody come along quite a while back, and they worked in retail, and they felt that their career there wasn't really going anywhere, and it wasn't where they saw themselves in the future. And they'd heard that tech was like lots of jobs and lots of opportunity, but they really didn't know where to start. And somehow, and I don't know exactly how, but they found out about Tech Meetup and just came along and had no background in tech or any knowledge about it. Came along, went to the talk, and then went out to pub afterwards with some of the other people that were there. And there were some developers there, and they said, recommended to him, if they were this person, that if they were interested in getting into tech, they should go and join a boot camp. And so they did. They went and signed up for the 16-week boot camp. They went through that and then eventually got a job as a tester where they're now working full time and looking to now build on that and become a developer. So there's somebody that's gone from like pre-tech, no background whatsoever, all the way through to a job and through Tech Meetup.
That's
So
lovely.
which is why I'm so passionate about like anybody from whatever background should be able to come, because you just never know.
Yeah, that's the power of networks. And in general, the even for product growth, the network effect of just people telling people is very important in difficult markets like which we are right now when it comes to changing jobs or finding job. Again, it's not a LinkedIn. It's not about applying in every single job. It's actually these networking events. It's about your network, and it's about going to these events and talking with real people, and finding your way. And that works a lot better. So, one more question, Keith. How much time that requires? Because you're organizing, you're running, you're doing topics, you're talking with people, and that's one event, once a month. How much of your time that actually takes?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not just me. There's a whole group of us, a whole organising committee that do all the work. It's pretty much the same task that need done every month. I think probably it's not a huge amount. Outside the event itself, probably, I don't know, 3 to 4 hours a month that I spend on it. Most of that is talking to people. So talking to our speakers, making sure one of the really important things each month is to make sure that the speakers understand that the audience and how to pitch it and to make sure it doesn't go on for too long, and make sure that the topic that they pick is something that's going to work for the audience and fit in with all the other topics that we're doing. So that's probably the main thing that I spend the time doing. It's just talking to people, which I really enjoy anyway. So I'm more than happy to talk to to people. So it's not a massive time commitment, I would say. There can be a bit of stress, like there's various stressful things that happen. Then sometimes you wonder why you're doing it, when you don't hear back from people, or your speaker's running late on the day or something like that. But generally, it's very rewarding, very well worth all the time that I spend on it. It's not something I think about too much, how much time I'm spending on it.
That's cool. If you want to scale this, let's say you have this event, and you did some survey, and people were like, "Oh, it's going to be awesome if we would have just AI," and you would instead of going like, "Hey, go create one," you would go like, "Okay, I'm going to open an AI event. I'm going to open an AI meetup, and it's going to be not on the first Thursday. Maybe it's going to be on the second Thursday," and suddenly you end up having, that's 4 events, and you run one every week. Would the time get multiplied 4 times, or you think there's when it comes to scaling of that, there's the same process which could be just scaled up, and you wouldn't be increasing your time that much?
No, it would be 4 times.
It would be 4 times.
Yeah, very, very difficult thing to do, to take on more than one.
Okay.
Very challenging.
All right. Well, that's what wraps up our conversation for today. Huge thank you for Keith for sharing the knowledge around how you think about events, his mindset, and as well the biggest challenge, being the venues, and other challenges, and how you guys approach. And if people want to learn more, Keith, about your tech event and just in general, maybe get in touch with you with suggestions or questions, how would they find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's the best place to find me. So Tech Meetup Glasgow is on LinkedIn. You'll find the group there with where we promote all our events. Our events are on Meetup as well. If you look up Tech Meetup Glasgow, we run first Thursday of every month, and obviously everybody is welcome. We get people from out of town all the time. We had somebody from Las Vegas who just happened to be in Glasgow, and they came along to our event. So if you are up in Glasgow and happen to be, if you're in Glasgow already, please come along to our event. If you're visiting, then please come along as well, because we love getting people from out of town. And that's how to get in touch.
Okay. And as well, if you're listening us, just scroll down, look at the show notes. All the links are over there. Thanks for tuning up today to listen to Mastering Tech Growth. Stay safe. See you online.